Welcome to the Open to Hope show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, I think we've got an amazing show that's going to be important for a lot of our audience today because it's a show about forgiveness and resilience of the human spirit. A lot of people who are watching this show that's brought to you by the Open to Hope Foundation and as well as the Compassionate Friends. And we know that a lot of folks in the Compassionate Friends have had some really harrowing stories, and many people have to tell about and survived and gone through. And Brooks has more than survived. So why don't you talk about him, Heidi, and introduce him?
He has, Mom. Brooks has not only survived, but he's thrived. And that's why I think this story is so amazing. It is a testament to the human spirit, and it is a testament to the way his parents raised him. And as you said, Mom, in 1979, Brooks was 16. His sister was 12 when two people came into their home and basically murdered the parents and held the family hostage for 4 hours. And Brooks will tell a little bit about it. And Brooks watched his dad die. And, you know, he and his sister thankfully got out of the house. They were very wounded and they got help and they lived. And let me tell you a little bit about Brooks today because I find him absolutely amazing. He is a film producer, an actor, a lawyer, a businessman. He was the youngest state senator to serve in Oklahoma in history at 27 years old. His sister is a professional educator. They both live outstanding lives and have made a huge difference in the world. And he's here today to tell us about how he did that, how he went on to survive after the horrible murders of his parents, and like you said, Mom, how he found forgiveness. So welcome to the show, Brooks. We're honored to have you here today.
Thank you, Heidi, very much. Thank you guys for having me on. It's been a long journey, as you can imagine, from the time I was 16 years old to, which is when the shootings happened. And as you said, my parents were murdered, and it was a home invasion. Basically, you know, they came and asked for help. My father was a minister. We've been missionaries to Brazil, and so that was in our DNA, was to try to help. And they wanted to use the phone, or one of them did, and they wound up pulling the guns on us and hog-tied us all hands and feet behind our back on the living room floor. And they took turns sexually assaulting my then 12-year-old sister. They sat down and ate the dinner that my mom had been fixing, and then shot us all in the back and left us for dead. And then when I was as you said, I sat there, I watched both my mother and my father die in front of me. And my sister was finally able to get herself untied, came in and cut me loose, and we got to a doctor's house a few miles away. I was able to drive us to this doctor to start helping us, and then they got us to the city, bigger hospital where they could actually start treating our injuries. We were in there for about 3 weeks. We missed our parents' funerals.
Wow.
It was tough. They caught the guys that shot us about 5 weeks later. They had killed 2 people in Texas as they were on the run and stolen their car, and then eventually got caught. Were brought back to Oklahoma, and they were both tried, both given the death sentence. And then convicted and given the death sentence. And then from there, I thought, okay, this is over. This, we can start trying to go on with our lives then. And which I found out, was a lot more complicated than what I had planned on. So I graduated that year from high school, went on to college, a rough road through college. Because part of it was that they kept bringing us back to testify, including the clemency hearing. For one of them, it was 9 times, but yeah, in trials and hearings, it was 7 times.
I've got to ask you a question. How did you feel inside? Were you angry? Were you upset? Were you depressed? Did you hate them?
All of the above, at different times. Early on, with my father having been a minister, I remember someone coming into my hospital room literally a few days after it happened and said, and I can still sort of see her standing over me in my bed as I was looking through the oxygen hoses and all that. but she said, you need to be able to forgive those guys. And if I could have reached her, I probably would have strangled her at the time, because that was just, as you guys can certainly appreciate, not very good timing to bring that up. But I knew it was true. I remember just knowing that, but I think the way that I coped in a lot of ways was to, go just bury myself in work and keep going and keep putting one foot in front of the other, and then and not spending a lot of time thinking about forgiveness.
We've talked to people where there have been murders, and one of the things that we have heard from them is it's very hard to go into that kind of forgiveness when you've got a court case going.
Absolutely true. And I think that's true with most things. I mean, when somebody in a way continues with the same kind of behavior that you're trying to forgive in the first place, it's really kind of hard to maintain that sense of really trying to move on and let go. And just other situations I've been in that are not as obviously as consequential as murdering my parents and shooting me and all the things that they did. But like you said, every time you have to walk into that courtroom, it's like they're denying everything that happened all over again. And so that just sets you way back, I think, in terms of being able to move forward.
So as it went, they eventually, both of them were given the death penalty, but one of them, it was commuted, so he had life imprisonment, right? But you
Right.
actually went to when one of them was executed. You and your sister were there.
Right.
And I think you made the comment that you thought you'd feel a lot better than you did, or that it would make a big difference or something.
For me, I met with Glenn Ake, he was the one whose case was overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court and went back, and we had new trials, and he got life sentences instead of the death penalty. And yet, here you had a situation of the shooter was had life sentences, and the non-shooter had the death sentence. And so we, as we were going through all that, and I was in the Senate at the time, and so that actually gave me enough leverage that I was able to get a meeting with Glenn Ake. It wasn't anything I planned. I was actually giving a speech, going through a tour of the prison where both of these guys were being held at the time. So it just happened that I said, look, I want to meet with him, and after a lot of no's, they eventually got around to, okay, yeah, we'll let you do it as long as he'll meet with you. And so I wound up having this 1.5 hour long meeting with him. And I did not go into that meeting expecting to forgive him, quite honestly. In fact,
What were you expecting? What did you want?
I wanted either one or the other of us not to walk out of there alive. And I frankly didn't care which one it was.
Wow.
I had, already been through Army Special Forces. I'd been the lawyer. And I saw it in the time before I walked into that meeting as, okay, my life finally makes sense. Now I know why, I'm getting a chance to meet with this guy, and I understand why, I went into the Army and learned to do some cool stuff, and I went into it, and I'm a member of the Senate. It's taken 15 years, but little self-help involved, and this guy's going to get justice. He was the one who didn't, who escaped the death penalty, essentially. And, but I think a lot of it had to do with the way he responded. He had played insanity. That was the basis of his U.S. Supreme Court case. So that's what I was expecting, was for him to come at me or do something like that. And it never happened. In fact, he apologized. I started to speak first, and I kind of choked up, and he said, "Can I say something?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, first of all, I want you to know that I'm so, so sorry for what I did to you and your family."
Wow.
And that was completely out of left field to me. I'd never expected to hear that. But I said to him, I have no idea what I want to say to you. I didn't plan this. I said, for 15 years, I've wanted nothing more than to see you dead. And I said, now I just want it to be over, because with all the other, I mean, behind the scenes, my life was in shambles. I'd just gone through a divorce. I'd, all kinds of problems. And I knew that, and that was despite the success of being in the Senate and being a lawyer. And I just, I knew that there were things eating me up inside, I guess is the best way to express it. And so I was a little bit at my wit's end. That's why I really didn't care which one of us walked out, I think.
Right.
And so, but over the course of that hour, hour and a half, which I kept him there because I knew a point would come where he'd drop his guard and I could see in his eyes whether he was being sincere or not. And this is a guy that was locked up 23 hours a day. So he's not used to looking people in the eye or having to look people in the eye. So I remember thinking, I'm gonna see what's for real here. And there was a moment where he did drop his guard and he was crying, he was fighting tears, and he was trying to wipe his face, and he was dealing with the handcuffs. And what I felt like I saw was sincerity, as much as he was probably capable of, but in the environment that he was in. But and I still wasn't ready necessarily to forgive him. I literally got up and I walked to the door, and then I remember, and I'd said to him early in the conversation that when I said, my father was a minister. My parents taught me that I should forgive, but that's not why I'm here. That's not what I'm about. That's not what's going to happen. And yet, when I was about to walk out the door, an hour and a half later, I walked over and I stood across the table from him, and I said, my father was a minister, taught me to forgive, but and then I said, I forgive you.
Wow.
And it was obviously not what I expected, but it was. I can remember literally falling back in my chair and feeling. It was like my body was full of water. It was like a poison that I could see. And I remember I could almost physically see the bottoms of my feet open up and just water flooding out all over the floor. It was such an amazing physical experience.
So Brooks, it sounds like you've been carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, and anger and revenge and hate, and then it just left you.
Yeah. I mean,
that's amazing.
Yeah. Part of it was, it felt like it had a clamp on my chest, and somebody took it off, and I could breathe for the first time in 15 years. And I really didn't even recognize how bad it was, maybe till that moment. But as I was about to walk into the meeting, that's when I really started to sense the amount of rage, because I thought of myself as a happy person. I mean, back then, you couldn't get elected to office unless you were somewhat likable.
Now you've decided to make a movie. You've become a film producer.
It's called The Amendment.
On The Amendment, which I've seen a trailer for, which looks unbelievable, you play your father.
Right.
That must have been pretty tough. I saw a little clip of the scene where your father dies.
Right.
And the son, who's played by somebody else, goes over to the father and is kissing him, and there's a very moving scene. And I can only imagine how difficult that scene must have been for you to kind of relive.
Right. When I was co-writing the script, and even at the point where I decided, or we had made the decision that I was going to play my father, I didn't think through it all the way. I mean, I just thought, wow, it's such an honor to play him. And I was excited about it, but I didn't think through the crime scene part of it. And of course, just so your audience will know, just a few minutes of the hour and a half long movie are the crime scenes. So it's not a crime movie. Most of the movie, virtually all of the movie, is our family life and growing up, and it divides time between my growing up and being in the Senate, and then eventually those two moments come together at the point where have the meeting with Ake. And the log line or tagline of the movie is, we are capable of much more than we ever thought possible. And so to me, that's forgiving, that is overcoming, that is anything that we're faced with. Ultimately, we can be better. We are capable of being our best selves, even when we don't think we are. And I think it's important for anyone that's struggling, myself, my family, or any one of your people in your audience, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not always a train coming at you. It is if we're able to hang on, if we're able to do those right things and know the things we know are right, make right decisions, we're going to wind up in a great place. And that's been my life experience. I lost my family. I got married again, had a divorce, and yet now I'm in a family. I have a 12-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter that are beautiful and incredible. And having a family is something that was very important to me, having lost my family at 16. But there's so much that we're capable of doing if we just keep persevering, keep trying.
I imagine when you say you forgave, I know people out there are thinking, I could never forgive this. I imagine when you say you forgave, you did not forgive the act of murdering your parents. Is that correct?
I think that's true. I think what I gave up, what I felt like I gave up, was my right to take revenge.
Okay.
Was to keep after him, because that was something that is, like I said, even though I was a happy person, all it took was getting in the weight room and needing that extra little push, and if my mind, I just noticed one time, a couple of years before I wound up having that meeting, that my mind would go to him and Hatch, the other guy, when I needed a little extra anger to push something over the line. And so, and I had actually checked with the Texas authorities about the possibility of having them taken to Texas and be prosecuted there, and thinking maybe they could carry out the death penalty, but it wasn't. So there were things like that, or even that meeting in the meeting that day, as opposed to having him either take my life or I took his. It was, it's time to forgive, and it's time to move on, and I give up. I actually have a line there that the Mike Bogle, who plays me in the movie, says, as he's trying to explain this to Leslie, saying, "Yeah, I still believe he deserves to die for what he did, but it's just not my fight anymore. I'm going to put this down."
If you had one piece of advice for somebody who's struggling with forgiveness, what would it be?
Don't think it's going to happen overnight. You can't force it. You can't conjure it. For me, it took 15 years, and I didn't see it coming. I think if we make that decision at some point, I want to be able to forgive someday. And I think that whether it's God or the universe or whatever, it takes you down the course of your life events in a way that will one day give you the ability to do that. And you just got to keep making right decisions along the way. No, it doesn't mean you don't make mistakes, but and it doesn't mean your mind doesn't go to some of those places. But at some point, I believe that we if we want it, we're going to get there, and it's a process. So that would be my advice.
Do you have a website for your movie?
Yes, we do. It's theamendmentmovie.com.
All right. Well, good luck on your movie, and it sounds fabulous. And thank you so much for being on the show today. I think you're going to inspire a lot of people.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and you guys are an inspiration to others, including me.
Thanks, Brooks. I feel like your parents are doing as much in their death as they did in their life through the work that you and your sister are doing. So thank you so much. Thank you for changing the world, and thank you for your message.
Thank you very much. All right. Hope to see you guys again.
Yep. And thanks for watching this show today. And Heidi and I always want to remind you, and I'm sure Brooks does too, if you've lost hope, please lean on ours till you find your own, and God bless.